The Grass is Always Greener, Chapter 12. Lloyd was fairly certain that Nia had purposely driven so fast he left his stomach back at Coco's, but Kai assured him this was just how she usually drove, something he highly doubted, since he normally loved fast rides. Still, he didn't miss the smirks she sent him when he hugged the ground once they reached their destination. Well played. What followed reminded Lloyd of the times he'd been dragged to the doctor's for a checkup. He got poked and prodded by several scientists to make sure the dimensional travel didn't do anything bad to him. He'd also been scanned by everything one could possibly be scanned by, asked to do some basic exercises, and just examined like a bug in a jar for hours on end. The only slight enjoyment he got was when the scientists' scans seemed to catch on to his powers, and they mistakenly thought it was leftover energy from the portal. It was too funny to correct them. Dr. Gary was leading all the proceedings, though he didn't look like he was enjoying himself any more than Lloyd had, since Garmadon was also there, breathing down his neck the entire time. "I'm not letting some geeks get the bright idea to dissect the kid," the four-armed man explained when asked by Zane. The Ice Ninja and the others had arrived to watch the proceedings as well. "If he's still alive, it is vivisection, not dissection," Zane corrected automatically, gaining disturbed looks from all those around. "Whatever," Garmadon grumbled. Needless to say, by the end of it, Lloyd was very annoyed, restless, and cranky. Fortunately for him, he knew the best way to work off steam. Pranks. He wasn't stupid. He knew better than to try and pull pranks on anyone in the lab. That was just asking to be blown to Kingdom Come. Fortunately for him, Master Wu had parked that world's version of the Destiny's Bounty outside the facility, and all the ninja were milling around it while they waited to hear the results of the tests. All of them were perfect targets. The first thing he did was simple but effective. He switched around all the salt and sugar in the bounty. If this world's Wu was as obsessed with tea even half as much as his uncle, then he wouldn't have to wait long to see the results. Next, he considered getting back at Nia for the wild ride that morning, but he soon dismissed the thought. Unfortunately, she knew he'd want to get her back and would be on her guard. Unless the opportunity arose, he was unlikely to catch her in a prank any time soon. So, he switched his sights to Jay. It was time to break out the classics. After gathering what he needed, he wandered over to where Jay was sitting and playing with a Rubik's Cube. "Hi, Jay," he said brightly. The Lightning Ninja looked up in surprise. "Oh, hey, little Lloyd. I didn't see you there. Did you want something?" "Nah," said Lloyd with a nonchalant shake of his head. "Cole just asked me to give you this." He then tossed Jay a can of nuts, making him nearly drop his Rubik's Cube to catch it. Jay looked at the can, then sent Lloyd a strange look. "He asked you to give me this?" he asked. Worried he'd already been found out, Lloyd forced himself to keep an innocent expression on his face. "Yep," he replied. "He said you might be hungry." Jay stared at him for a moment longer before a smile broke out on his face. "That's great," he said. "If he's talking to you that much, it must mean he likes you. Normally it takes Cole forever to warm up and say more than one answers to anyone. Then that's just if they ask him something first." Lloyd tensed. Come to think of it, he hadn't heard the Earth Ninja say a single word to him since he'd gotten there. The only times he'd even heard him speak was when he was making a smart remark to someone else. He still hadn't said a word to him the entire morning Lloyd had been there. Now the little green ninja was wondering if he should take that personally. Thank goodness Jay still bought it. The Lightning Ninja then set the can beside him and turned back to his Rubik's Cube. "Tell Cole I'll eat it in a minute. I'm almost done with this." Lloyd nodded, not that Jane noticed, with his focus on the cube, and scurried away to hide behind a corner and watch. Soon enough, Jay slotted the correct colors into each side of the cube and put it down to pick up the can. The results were beautiful. Jay shrieked his head off when he opened the can, and a stream of fake snakes shot out of it on the springs. It was all Lloyd could do to stifle his giggles as he watched the brave ninja gasp and clutch his chest as he tried to recover from the scare. He'd never seen anyone get that worked up over spring snakes. A scream that loud was sure to attract attention, and sure enough, Cole came hurrying over to see Jay still gathering his wits. Cole took one look around, saw the empty can and the snakes scattered on the floor, and seemed to realize what happened. He sat down next to Jay and rubbed his back until he caught his breath. "You okay?" he asked when Jay felt up to speaking. "Yeah," said Jay, now playing with his Rubik's Cube with a lot more vigor. "I'm guessing you didn't actually want me to have that can." Cole frowned and shook his head. "Figured," said Jay, still twisting the cube in his hand. Lloyd then beat a hasty retreat in case they decided to come after him. Part of him wondered why Jay had started playing with his cube again instead of ranting and swearing revenge like the Jay he knew would have done. He discarded the thought quickly, though, and focused on the task at hand. He had other people to prank. By the time lunch rolled around, he had his next few tricks all lined up. Everyone decided to eat in the Bounty, mostly because Coco had shown up and had dragged Garmadon out of the facility to give the poor scientist some breathing room. When they were all seated in the Bounty's galley, his first prank came to fruition. Lloyd was treated to the sight of Master Wu taking a sip of tea, only to promptly spit it out in disgust. Even better, Nia happened to be sitting at the table across from him and got a face full of salty tea. Double prank impact. Awesome. Garmadon sure seemed to think so, as he began laughing his head off at his seat at the table, banging it with 3 of his fists. Lloyd couldn't help but feel slightly proud. Even if it wasn't his actual father, getting this sort of approval was all he'd ever wanted. Everyone else either glared at him or tried to help Master Wu and Nia clean up the mess. Jay reached for the box of napkins, only to fall back with another shriek as more snakes sprung out as soon as he opened it. It was just as good as the first time he'd gotten him with the same prank. It was really looking like Jay would be an easy target. Jay seemed to recover quicker this time and grabbed the napkins to give to Nia. Kai grabbed a handful as well, but when he sat on a chair to help Master Wu, a loud farting sound filled the air. The fire ninja turned as red as his uniform. Whoopee cushions. Classic. Garmadon was in hysterics at this point, and everyone but Lloyd was glaring at him now. It was looking like they suspected him of the pranks, rather than Lloyd, but no one was ready to say it yet. No one but Coco, that is. "Did you do this, Garm?" she asked, disapproval clear in her voice, though she looked amused as well. Zane, who had been helping a jittery Jay with the remainder of the spilled tea, added his 2 cents. "You have ruined a perfectly good Jay. Look at him. He has anxiety." Many of the ninja groaned at that, and Cole sent the ninja a dry look. "Zane, what have we said about memes?" Garmadon managed to lift his head and replied breathlessly, "No, but man, do I wish I did. That was perfect." He then collapsed in another fit of laughter, and most of the group still looked unconvinced. All but Nia and Cole, who were both now sending suspicious glances at Lloyd. Coco was also looking over at him with a knowing look, though surprisingly she didn't seem angry. He gave his best innocent look back at all of them. The chaos eventually died down and lunch continued, though Master Wu would continuously give longing sighs while staring at his teapot. He had yet to find the sugar. At least it was calm until Garmadon asked, "Hey, Lil Lloyd, pass me that bowl of chips." Everyone at the table stopped and turned to look at the former warlord. "Lil Lloyd?" Kai asked with a raised eyebrow. Garmadon shrugged. "It's still Lloyd, but it's different enough to keep them straight from Loloid. Besides," he said while gesturing towards Lloyd, "he's a shrimp." Lloyd looked at Garmadon with a betrayed expression. "I believe I hear 3 L's in that name." Garmadon scowled at him. "Then you need to get your hearing checked, 'cause nobody asked you," he said defensively. "Well, I think that's adorable," said Nia, rubbing salt in the wound. She then raised her hand in the air. "All in favor of making that his official nickname?" She was already getting back at him for the salty tea in her face. He was going to need to step up his game. Despite Lloyd's protests, everyone else raised their hands in the air and said, "Aye." It was official. That nickname was here to stay. And Lloyd was not happy about it. Time to pull his next trick. Using a muted cell phone he'd stolen from a scientist who was particularly sadistic about poking him with needles, he'd give it back later. He checked the proper app was downloaded and dialed a number from a list Kai had given him last night, hit play on recording, and waited. Zane perked up as his cell began to ring, and with a brief frown at the unfamiliar number answered it. Immediately, the air-splitting screech of dial-up began blasting out of the phone's speakers, making many of those at the table wince at the sound. Surprisingly, Zane didn't even flinch at the terrible noise. And then, to Lloyd's surprise, he started speaking into the phone as if holding a conversation. "Hello. I'm fine. My friends are fine too. In a few hours, we're waiting for test results. Pizza would be nice." Was he pranking him back? Was this some kind of reverse prank? Maybe not, as everyone around him was watching this like it was normal. Finally, the dial-up noise ran out, and Zane said, "I love you, bye," and hung up. Lloyd only stared dumbly at them. "What?" he asked in a lost tone. Anything up with your mom, bro? Asked Kai casually as he continued eating the last of his lunch. Zane shrugged. Oh, the usual things mother asks regular teenagers. How am I doing? How are all of you? When will I be home? What do I want for dinner? She seemed less interested in my replies today, but she can do that when she's stressed. He said it all like getting calls like that were a common everyday occurrence. And from the looks on everyone's faces, this was an everyday occurrence. Either they were all working together to reverse prank him, or this Zane's mom really did sound like dial-up. He wasn't sure which was more unlikely. He spent so much time pondering it that the rest of lunch went by in relative peace. At least until Jay got up to get something from the fridge. And upon opening the door, he was once again assaulted by snakes and screamed. Definitely an easy target, that one. There was still one person he hadn't pranked yet today. Cole, who still hadn't spoken a word to Lloyd and actually seemed to be actively ignoring his presence. Lloyd was intent to get him one way or another, and since the Earth Ninja seemed determined not to look at him, that just made his job all the easier. He'd give him something he couldn't ignore. And so Lloyd sat and waited in a bush. He'd seen Cole leave to go into the forest surrounding the facility for something a few minutes ago, and he was set to come back any second now. Target in sight. The unsuspecting Earth Ninja was walking casually down the path, completely oblivious to Lloyd's presence. Lloyd grinned and readied the water balloon in his hand. Let's see Cole ignore this. But just as he hefted his arm back to throw, Cole turned and stared him dead in the eye. Lloyd froze like a deer caught in the headlights, his arm still raised with the balloon in his hand. Busted. Cole didn't move, only continued to stare Lloyd down with a piercing look, slowly raising one eyebrow as if daring him to follow through. The more he stared, the more nervous Lloyd became. Suddenly, he was very aware this Cole looked strong enough to snap him like a twig. How this Cole seemed a lot less friendly than the gruff but goofy one he was used to. How this Cole looked angry. Lloyd took a step back, then two. Then he dropped his water balloon and ran. Or at least, he tried to. Before he could go far, he felt a strong grip on the back of his hoodie stop him in his tracks. He was so busted. Before he could protest, Cole lifted him up, hefted him over his shoulder, and began to walk away. There was little Lloyd could do aside from hanging helplessly like a sack of potatoes. Maybe he should have just pranked Nia after all.